15. Black R&B female singers who were actually prostitutes. Forget everything you think you know about the queens of black music. Behind the glittering stages and chart-topping hits lies a world darker, messier, and more dangerous than fans ever imagined. These were voices that shaped America, but their rise came through backroom deals, whispered rumors, and a music industry willing to sacrifice young black women to feed its machine. Some call it ambition, others call it exploitation. But today, you're about to hear the stories no one dared to speak out loud. Before we dive in, hit subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence because the truth starts right now. Esther Phillips. Esther Phillips was one of the most extraordinary R&B and soul voices to emerge from the 1950s through the early 1980s. Born Esther Mae Jones in Houston, she was discovered as a young teenager by band leader Johnny Otis, who recognized her raw, arresting talent the moment she stepped onto a small club stage. By just 15, she had already become a national sensation with a #1 hit, an almost unimaginable rise for a girl her age navigating an industry dominated entirely by adults. Yet behind that early fame lay a far more fragile reality. Esther was young, unprotected, and surrounded by people who held power over her career and her future. Over time, her name became attached to troubling stories, tales of exploitation, manipulation, and emotional pressure that shaped the darker chapters of her life. While sensational videos often exaggerate or distort these experiences, they stem from the very real vulnerability she faced as a minor thrust into a harsh, fast-moving entertainment world. As the years went on, the emotional wounds of her early career, combined with relentless schedules and unstable support systems, pushed Esther toward addiction, an ongoing struggle that she openly battled while still producing deeply moving music. Her voice, capable of turning sorrow into something achingly beautiful, carried the weight of everything she'd survived. Each performance, whether in R&B, country, soul, or jazz, revealed a woman whose talent never dimmed, even when her personal life fell under strain. Esther Phillips' story is not defined by scandal, as some portrayals suggest, but by resilience. She rose from poverty, faced pressures no child should endure, and still carved out a place in music history. Her legacy is one of courage and artistry, a reminder of both the brilliance and the vulnerability behind one of the most unforgettable voices of her time. Etta James. Etta James remains one of the most powerful voices ever to rise from American R&B, soul, and blues. Born Jamesetta Hawkins, her childhood was marked by instability, a young girl moving between caregivers, searching for safety in a world that offered little of it. Music became her anchor early on, a place where she could pour out every ache and every unanswered question. By her teens, she was already singing with a fierce emotionality that would later make At Last a timeless American treasure. As Etta stepped into the music industry, she entered a world where opportunities were tightly controlled, and young female artists, especially black women, were often at the mercy of those who held the contracts, the radio connections, and the power. Many modern retellings, including sensationalized videos, dramatize her experiences through claims of exploitation, coercion, or manipulation tied to influential figures like Leonard Chess. While these portrayals are frequently exaggerated or speculative, they reflect the broader truth of the era. The industry was unforgiving, and its pressures fell heaviest on women who came from difficult beginnings. What is undeniable is the emotional toll Etta carried with her. The scars from her early life, combined with the demands of fame, contributed to struggles with addiction and periods of personal turmoil. Yet even in her darkest moments, her voice never lost its brilliance. She sang with a depth and rawness that made every lyric feel lived in, every performance something unfiltered and deeply human. Songs like I'd Rather Go Blind still stop listeners in their tracks, not because of scandal, but because no one else could make heartbreak sound quite like she did. Etta James's story is ultimately not one of exploitation, but of resilience. She survived an upbringing that could have crushed her spirit, entered an industry filled with obstacles, and still built a legacy that forever shaped American music. When we remember Etta, we remember the fire, the elegance, and the emotional truth she brought to every note, proof that strength can be born from even the hardest beginnings. Big Maybelle. Big Maybelle, born Mabel Louise Smith, was a force of nature in the world of blues and early R&B. With a voice bold enough to shake the walls of any club and tender enough to touch the deepest corners of the heart, she carved out her place in music history during the 1950s. Her breakout hit, Gabbin' Blues, turned her into a rising star overnight, showcasing a vocal power that was impossible to ignore. But behind that commanding presence on stage was a woman navigating an industry that offered applause in public and pressure behind closed doors. Like many black female artists of her era, Big Maybelle entered a business where the people controlling the studio's bookings and publicity often held overwhelming influence. Modern retellings, including the one in the transcript, paint her journey with dramatic strokes describing exploitation within the record company and pressure-filled environments that made her path far harder than her audience ever knew. While such narratives are frequently exaggerated for effect, they echo a broader truth. Female performers, especially black women, had few protections and even fewer advocates as they tried to climb toward success. The emotional and physical weight of that world took a toll on Maybelle. Accounts of her life speak of struggles with addiction battles that were common among artists who faced constant touring, unstable support systems, and the non-stop grind of mid-century music circuits. Yet, even as hardship tightened around her, Maybelle continued to deliver performances infused with fire humor and an unmistakable richness that remains influential today. Her voice carried joy, sorrow, and the stubborn hope of a woman who refused to be forgotten. Big Maybelle's final years were marked by financial hardship, a painful contrast to the applause that once followed her. She passed away at just 47, leaving behind a legacy that the public is only now beginning to appreciate fully. Her story is not just a tale of struggle. It is a reminder of the courage it took for a black woman to rise, sing, and make her mark in a world that was not built to lift her up. Tina Turner. Tina Turner, born Anna Mae Bullock, rose from the small clubs of St. Louis to become the undisputed queen of rock and soul. Her voice, raw, volcanic, electrifying, was unlike anything audiences had ever heard. When she first stepped onto the stage with Ike Turner's band as a teenager, no one imagined that she would one day redefine the boundaries of rock music across the world. But behind the blazing performances and dazzling sequins lived a woman fighting battles that the public would not fully understand until decades later. In her memoir, Tina, she spoke courageously about the abuse she endured during her marriage to Ike Turner. The violence, manipulation, and emotional control were painfully real, and Tina herself shared these truths so other women might find strength in their own lives. However, sensational retellings, such as the dramatized versions seen in certain videos, often push her story further, adding shocking claims like an early rape or forced industry deals that Tina never described or confirmed. These distortions overshadow the powerful reality her survival and escape were extraordinary enough without embellishment. Tina's journey after leaving Ike was just as remarkable as her rise to fame. She walked away with nothing but her name, no money, no property, and no guarantees, and rebuilt her career from the ground up. For nearly a decade, she worked relentlessly, performing in small venues, television specials, and wherever opportunities appeared. Then, in the 1980s, she roared back with Private Dancer, transforming herself into a global icon and proving that reinvention has no age limit. Her story became one of the greatest comebacks in music history. In the end, Tina Turner's legacy is not rooted in scandal, but in triumph. She refused to let violence define her. She refused to let a man's shadow dim her brilliance. And she inspired millions of women survivors, dreamers, with her ability to break free, to heal, and to rise higher than ever before. Tina Turner did not simply sing about strength, she lived it. Aretha Franklin. Aretha Franklin wasn't just the queen of soul. She was a storm wrapped in a woman's body, a voice so explosive it could shake a church pew or silence an entire stadium. From the outside, her rise looked heavenly, a prodigy touring with her father's gospel circuit, a teenage powerhouse recording music that would soon crown her an American icon. But behind that divine voice was a childhood far more turbulent than the public ever imagined, a world where the demands on her were extreme, long before she was old enough to understand what fame could take from a girl. Over the years, the internet and sensational videos have pushed shocking claims into the spotlight, dark whispers that Aretha was forced, controlled, or violated in the shadows of her youth and early career. These stories spread like wildfire because they fit the tragic template people expect black women to endure. But here's the truth. No reliable historical record confirms these allegations. They are the kind of dramatic retellings that get clicks, not the kind that withstand scrutiny. Still, the fact that such rumors exist at all tells us how chaotic and unprotected her early world truly was. When a young teenager becomes a mother twice, when adults around her hold power, when she is thrust into a demanding gospel circuit, people fill in the blanks with the most disturbing possibilities. What is undeniable is that Aretha carried scars even if the world never knew their full shape. Her marriage to Ted White was volatile. Her private life swung between triumphs and breakdowns. She battled loneliness, perfectionism, and emotional storms that could swallow any ordinary person whole. Yet every time she stepped to the microphone, she transformed that chaos into Fire, Respect, Think, Chain of Fools, songs that didn't just entertain, they roared. And that's why her story shocks us more than any rumor ever could. She wasn't powerful because she had an easy life. She was powerful because she crawled through whatever darkness she faced and still emerged with a voice the world will never forget. Victoria Spivey. Victoria Spivey didn't just sing the blues, she survived the kind of world that manufactured the blues. When she stepped into the smoky clubs of St. Louis in the 1920s, she was barely 20, armed with nothing but a fierce voice and the stubborn will to escape poverty. Her gift was undeniable. Her presence was fire, and that's exactly why the industry closed in on her so quickly. This was the dawn of the recording age, a time when powerful men ran the labels, the studios, the contracts, and the lives of young women desperate for a chance to be heard. As her name began to rise, so did the rumors, whispered stories, dark accusations, tales that the moment she walked into Paramount Records for her first major opportunity, someone behind the desk demanded far more than her signature. These allegations, like the dramatic version told in certain videos, paint a brutal picture. A frightened, ambitious young woman trapped between her dream and a door that wouldn't open unless she paid a price no artist should ever have to consider. But again, these are sensationalized accounts, not verified historical fact. What is real, however, is the cruel environment black women faced in those early music industries where their talent was celebrated, but their safety often wasn't even an afterthought. And here's the twist, the shock that truly belongs to Victoria Spivey's name. Instead of letting the industry swallow her whole, she did something almost unthinkable for a woman of her time. She walked out and built her own empire. In 1929, she founded Spivey Records, grabbing back the power that so many believed she would never have. She controlled the music, the rights, the recordings. She turned the system that tried to crush her into a throne she stood on for decades. Victoria Spivey's story doesn't shock because of what rumor says happened to her. It shocks because of what she refused to let define her. Ruth Brown. Ruth Brown wasn't just the queen of R&B, she was the woman whose voice built Atlantic Records brick by brick, hit by hit. When she stepped into the studio in the late 1940s, the label was nothing more than a hopeful startup. But once Ruth opened her mouth, everything changed. Her explosive vocals, her charm, her stage swagger, she turned Atlantic into the powerhouse the world later called the house that Ruth built. Yet for all that success, the world rarely saw the storm she lived through behind the scenes. As with many women of her era, especially, black singers fighting for a place in a white-dominated industry, rumors swirled around her. Rumors echoed in dramatized videos that claim she was pressured, cornered, or taken advantage of by powerful men at the label, including founder Ahmet Ertegun. These stories, however gripping, are not backed by firm historical evidence. What is true is that Ruth spent years navigating a system where executives made all the rules and artists, especially women, had almost no leverage. Whether the rumors were born from whispers, exaggeration, or the harsh truth of how powerless a young black woman could be, they reveal just how dangerous the industry was behind its glittering facade. And then comes the twist that truly cements Ruth Brown's legacy. After giving Atlantic a string of hits after helping the label become one of the biggest in America, Ruth discovered she'd been denied the royalties she rightfully earned, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. Most artists would have stayed silent. Ruth didn't. She marched into court and fought a battle no woman of her generation had ever dared to start. And she won. Her lawsuit forced the industry to reckon with decades of exploitation and opened the door for fair royalty reforms that still protect artists today. Ruth Brown's story isn't shocking because of the rumors, it's shocking because she refused to stay quiet. She didn't just sing the blues, she changed the business that profited from them. Gladys Bentley. Gladys Bentley was the kind of performer who could stop Harlem in its tracks. At the height of the Harlem Renaissance, she strode onto the stage in a tuxedo, hair cropped close swagger, sharp enough to slice through the smoky air of the speakeasies. She didn't just sing the blues, she owned them. Her voice was thunder, her presence was rebellion, and her very existence challenged everything 1920s America thought it understood about gender, desire, and power. But the same fire that made her a star also made her a target in a world terrified of women who refused to play by its rules. The darker retellings of her life, like those echoed in dramatized videos, paint a brutal picture of the industry surrounding her. Stories of club owners who used their influence to demand what no young performer should ever be pressured to give, and producers who held careers hostage behind closed doors. Whether these stories grew from whispers, fear, or the grim reality of a nightlife run by powerful men, one truth stands unshakable. Gladys Bentley was a queer black woman in one of the most dangerous environments an artist could navigate. And in that era, survival often meant bending to a world determined to break you. Then came the most shocking twist of all, not from the clubs, but from society itself. As America marched into the conservative 1950s, queer performers were pushed off stages, out of clubs, and into hiding. In that suffocating climate, Gladys, once a symbol of unapologetic identity, faced enormous pressure to abandon the life she had built. Public campaigns painted queerness as a threat, and rumors insisted she needed to marry a man to protect her career, her safety, even her freedom. Whether driven by fear, survival, or the impossible weight of the times, her sudden conversion and marriage shocked fans who once saw her as an icon of defiance. Gladys Bentley's story is a collision of brilliance and brutality, a reminder that the world often punishes the people who are born to change it. She didn't just sing the blues. She exposed the blues that America tried to hide. Dinah Washington. Dinah Washington. The woman. The world would one day call the Queen of the Blues, lived with a voice so powerful it could silence a nightclub in a single breath. But behind that voice, sharp, elegant, and unmistakably hers, was a reality far harsher than the glamorous photographs ever revealed. Born Ruth Jones, she entered the industry young, hungry, and dazzlingly talented. Yet talent alone never protected a black woman in the music business of the 1940s and 50s. Dinah walked into a world where the spotlight glittered while the shadows behind it swarmed with men who controlled not just the money, but the destiny of every rising singer. Dramatized accounts like the one in the transcript lean into the darkest corners of her story tales of managers and label executives using their power to push her into compromising situations, insisting that closeness and compliance were the secret keys to radio play touring slots or chart position. These stories, though exaggerated and unproven, reflect a chilling truth about the era. Backroom deals, whispered threats, and unspoken demands were the uncredited producers of many careers, especially those of young black women who had everything to lose by saying no. The pressure to stay on top was relentless. Dinah Washington, with her rapid-fire delivery and fiery personality, dominated the R&B charts with more than 24 hits. But the higher she climbed, the more unforgiving the industry became. Behind closed doors, she battled expectations that stretched far beyond music demands to be agreeable, desirable, controllable. Whether the rumors were true, half-true, or simply the industry's favorite form of punishment they carried, one message to keep her crown. Dinah had to navigate a minefield of power dynamics that had nothing to do with talent. And yet, she refused to vanish. She fought, she sang, she pushed back with a ferocity that electrified every room she entered. Even as hardship chipped at her private life, Dinah left behind a legacy of brilliant songs that still cut straight to the bone, performances that remind us that greatness often rises from the most merciless environments. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday was more than a jazz singer. She was a storm, a warning, a wound that learned how to sing. Long before the world called her Lady Day, she was a teenage girl in Baltimore fighting to survive the kind of life most people only read about in cautionary tales. When records from the 1920s show Billie was arrested for working in a brothel at just 13, it wasn't scandal, it was desperation. Her childhood was a battleground, and the world pushed her into adulthood far too soon. But out of that chaos grew a voice so haunting, so drenched in truth, it could make a room full of strangers hold their breath. As Billie rose through Harlem's vibrant but unforgiving nightlife, the legends around her grew just as quickly. Decades later, videos like the one in the transcript began spinning those early struggles into darker, more dramatic narratives, suggesting that powerful producers forced themselves on her in exchange for recording opportunities and that her career was built on exploitation rather than talent. These are myths stitched together from rumor-era gossip and the public's hunger for tragedy. There is no historical record proving she was coerced by producers. But the fact that so many believe these tales reveals something deeper. Billie lived in a world where such abuses weren't just possible, they were common. What was undeniably real was the brutality she faced from society itself. Racism trailed her everywhere she went. The FBI stalked her for singing Strange Fruit, a song the government thought was too dangerous for a black woman to perform. Addiction wrapped around her life until she could barely breathe. Yet every night she stepped on stage, she carried all of that pain into her phrasing, soft, trembling, devastating. When Billie sang, she didn't entertain. She confessed. Billie Holiday's story shocks not because of the rumors, but because of the truth. The world broke her again and again, and she still managed to carve out one of the most unforgettable voices in American music. Her life was rough, raw, and unfair, but her legacy is pure fire. Laverne Baker. Laverne Baker, the electrifying R&B star of Atlantic Records, was a woman whose voice could ignite a dance floor before the band even finished the intro. With hits like Tweedly Dee, she didn't just enter the music scene, she erupted into it, becoming one of the most magnetic performers of the 1950s. Her talent was undeniable, her charisma impossible to copy, and yet the story surrounding her rise has always carried a darker shadow, whispered about in backstage corridors and revived in dramatized videos like the one from the transcript. These retellings lean into the industry's ugliest rumors, stories claiming Laverne had to give in to compromise herself behind closed doors in order to secure a contract or get her records played. Tales of coercion, quid pro quo encounters, and powerful men treating her success as a transaction rather than a triumph. But none of these explosive allegations are backed by solid historical evidence. What is true is that she navigated a business where such abuses were disturbingly common, especially for young black women whose careers depended on men controlling the studios, the distribution, and the radio stations. In that era, even the smallest no from a woman could mean the end of everything she worked for. What makes Laverne Baker's story so gripping isn't the rumor. It's the fight she waged after the industry betrayed her in plain sight. When a white singer released a watered-down cover of her hit Tweedly Dee and outsold her nationwide, Laverne didn't stay silent. She confronted the system publicly, exposing how black artists were robbed, copied, and pushed aside while their imitators soared. And instead of letting bitterness destroy her, she reinvented herself, leaving the U.S. for nearly 20 years and running entertainment for American troops overseas, where audiences loved her without politics, prejudice, or industry games. Laverne Baker wasn't defined by scandal, she was defined by fire. She didn't just survive the system, she outlasted it. Her legacy is the voice that refused to be erased. Ella Fitzgerald. Ella Fitzgerald, the woman the world would later worship as the First Lady of Song, did not begin her journey beneath chandeliers and concert halls. Before the elegance, before the Grammys, before her voice melted into American history, she was a homeless teenage girl wandering the streets of Harlem, hungry, vulnerable, and desperate for a chance to survive. When she stepped onto the Apollo Theater stage for Amateur Night in 1934, she wasn't looking for fame. She was looking for salvation. But in the shadowed corners of that era's music scene, salvation often came with a price. Some dramatized accounts, like the one in the transcript, spin her rise into a disturbing story. Whispers that bandleader Chick Webb or powerful ballroom owners demanded private compliance in exchange for stage time or recording opportunities. These tales paint the industry as a cage, and Ella as a trapped young girl forced to navigate dangers no performer should face. But these claims are not supported by historical evidence. They're the kind of shocking embellishments that appear decades later, fueled by rumor, fear, and the public's appetite for tragedy over truth. What is true is this: Ella's early life left her exposed to exploitation of all kinds. She was arrested, bounced between reform schools, and lived completely alone at an age when most children are still protected at home. She stepped into show business with no family shield, no mentor to guard her, and no understanding of how predatory the entertainment world could be for a poor black girl who only wanted to sing. That vulnerability is what makes the rumors cling to her story. Even if they're invented, they reflect the dangers she very realistically could have faced. But here's the shock that matters. Ella Fitzgerald escaped all of it. She didn't just survive, she dominated. Her voice became silk and lightning. She broke racial barriers, sold millions of records, toured the world, and reshaped jazz itself. The world tried to build myths around her pain, but her legacy stands on something far more powerful: the unshakable brilliance of a woman who rose from nothing and conquered everything. Faye Adams. Faye Adams, the soaring R&B powerhouse behind the 1953 smash hit Shake a Hand, had a voice so commanding it could lift an entire congregation or silence a juke joint with a single note. When she opened her mouth, people felt it raw, gospel-deep, full of a trembling sincerity that cut straight through the noise of early R&B radio. But the world she stepped into was built on shadows as much as spotlight. And for a young black woman in the 1950s, talent alone was rarely enough to open the studio door. Retellings like the one from the transcript amplify the darkest rumors of her rise, whispers that producers or industry gatekeepers demanded private favors before offering contracts or airplay, that the price of a hit record wasn't just talent but submission. But there is no concrete historical record confirming these allegations. Instead, these stories echo the climate of the time, a male-dominated industry where power was absolute, and where women, especially black women, faced pressure, manipulation, and unspoken expectations at nearly every turn. The rumors surrounding Faye Adams may not be factual, but they reflect the brutal environment countless women had to navigate. What is undeniable is how quickly fame wrapped around her and crushed back. Shake a Hand dominated the R&B charts for 10 straight weeks, a monumental achievement for any artist, but especially for a woman coming from the gospel circuit with no powerful connections. Yet after the spotlight burned its brightest, Faye recoiled from the industry's demands. The noise, the pressure, the behind-the-scenes battles, it was all too much. She stepped away from R&B at the height of her success, walking out of a business that many said required too much of her soul. And in one of the most dramatic turns of any 1950s singer, Faye Adams returned to where it all began, the church. She turned her back on showbiz industry politics and the cruel grind of fame, choosing instead the purity of gospel music. A world where her voice didn't have to be traded, negotiated, or protected. She didn't vanish because she failed. She left because the industry demanded more than any artist should ever have to give. Mabel King. Mabel King is best remembered today as the warm, no-nonsense mother from the hit sitcom What's Happening, but long before television made her a familiar face, she was a young gospel singer in Harlem, chasing a dream that kept slipping through her fingers. Her voice was rich, booming, full of church fire, a sound that could lift a room and silence it in the same breath. But the music world she walked into in the early 1950s wasn't built to protect women like her. It was built to test them. According to the dramatized retellings echoed in the transcript, Mabel's early journey through tiny clubs and gospel circuits was riddled with predatory gatekeepers, men who, according to rumor, treated access to the stage as a bargaining chip and demanded far more than talent in return. These stories are not historically verified, but they reveal the brutal climate so many young black women faced in industry where promises were whispered, pressure was constant, and power hovered heavily over every decision. Whether the specific tales are true or exaggerated, the danger they describe was very real. Mabel tried to break into R&B, pushing through crowded auditions, smoky club nights, and endless disappointment. She recorded, she hustled. She fought for opportunities that always seemed to go to someone thinner, younger, or connected to the right man behind the curtain. Her R&B career sputtered not because she lacked talent, her voice was undeniable, but because the industry she entered demanded sacrifices she refused or was unable to make. Eventually, the grind of the music world left her bruised and exhausted. Then came the unexpected plot twist. Mabel King reinvented herself completely. She walked away from the unkind world of R&B and stepped into theater, and suddenly everything clicked. Broadway welcomed her, Hollywood embraced her, and television made her unforgettable. Her power didn't come from bending to the industry. It came from leaving one world behind and conquering another on her own terms. In the end, the lives of these trailblazing black women leave us with one unsettling question. Were they victims of a brutal industry, survivors of a racist era, or icons who rose in spite of the myths built around them? The truth may lie somewhere in the cracks between rumor and reality. Their voices shaped American music, but their stories still divide audiences today. So what do you believe, were these legends protected, exploited, or misunderstood by history? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence for more untold stories.